Non-farm payrolls increased by 372,000 in June, above economist estimates. For more on the state of the U.S. jobs market, joining us now is U.S. Labor Secretary Marty Walsh. Yahoo Finance's Rick Newman is here as well. Mr. Secretary, always great to get some time with you. Good jobs number here today. What policies from the administration do you think are working especially well to keep the job market humming along?
Well, I think a couple of things that are working really well here. Certainly go back a year, getting people vaccinated, getting confidence back in the workforce out there. I think it's important. We saw about 9 million jobs have come back since President Biden has taken office. This report shows that the private sector employment is back to where it was pre-pandemic. We saw that in this report, manufacturing was also back to pre-pandemic, and there's a lot of good signs in this report. But I think one sign that's really good is seeing the childcare industry hiring more people this month. And that's the first time, quite honestly, in a while, which I think in the long-term sustainability of getting the 5 million people or so that are still unemployed, getting them to work. A lot of those folks are not going to work because they don't have a strong, adequate childcare. And I think that's kind of a long-term plan. I also think it's really important for us in this country, for Congress to pass the CHIPS Innovation Act that the president is pushing. And that's a bill that will create opportunities for us to build more manufacturing here and create the computer chips that we need for our devices. Two things happen there. One is we're less dependent on foreign imports. Number two, it will help us potentially, God forbid, down the road where we have a situation like a pandemic or something with supply chain, those products will be made here in the United States of America. So those are some good things that are moving forward on the policy front and future policy front.
Hey, Marty, Rick Newman here. Income growth is slowing. And of course, income growth is negative when you account for inflation. What is going on there?
Well, I think when you talk about slowing, I think last month, year over year, it was 5.2%, 5.3%. It's 5.1% this month. But if you look at the low wage worker, they're seeing the bigger gains. So that's a positive sign. And clearly, with more income, I think a lot of people saying that income's not keeping up with inflation. I think inflation's outpacing income, and what we want to do is, raise wages when we can and where we can, and work with companies to raise those wages. But we need to continue to do everything we can to bring those inflationary pressures down, so American families feel a positive in their paycheck. I think that's something that we have to continue to do. So I think if you look back on a chart over the last 20 years, you still see income, higher level income year over year right now than we did, say, 10 years ago.
To what extent do you believe inflation?
Meaning, when I say income, the additional wages in the pocket, that it means.
Understood. And so within that, to what extent do you believe that inflation is actually bringing people back into the workforce?
Can you say that one more time?
Sure. To what extent do you believe, because of inflationary price pressures that consumers are facing right now, that is actually bringing people back into the workforce or having them kind of turn over or look for other jobs where they are being paid more?
I think I didn't hear the question right. Sorry about that, because there's a car going by here. But I think that we need to continue to get people, if this is what you asked me, get them back into the workforce. I think what's happening, inflation is not keeping people out of the workforce. There's different factors, and when you look at unemployment, we're still at a 7-year low when it comes to unemployment in this country. And again, we just need to, as an administration, the president is doing everything we can, laying down policies, bringing down gas prices, bringing down food price at the kitchen table, and we can't lose sight of the fact that the inflation that we're seeing in the United States of America is a global inflation problem, and there's a lot of different factors for that. It's what's happening in Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, and what Putin's doing there. It's also what's happening with the supply chain issues all around the country. And supply chain issues aren't just simply unloading ships in ports. It's actually creating these products. China was shut down for a few months earlier this year because of the pandemic. So there's lots of different reasons. And I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what I thought I heard.
Marty, I'm sure you've seen the consumer confidence surveys. Some of those show that Americans' attitudes are just terrible. I mean, by one measure, the worst they've ever been. What can the Biden administration do to cheer people up?
Well, I don't think it's just the Biden administration. I think it's, I was talking to somebody earlier today, we're living in a very unique time. People have gone through stresses. We were told in the very beginning of the pandemic, and I would tell this message often, that we were going to have mental health stresses from the pandemic. There was lots of loss of life. Families lost loved ones. Families had people sick. a lot going on in the world. We're seeing prime ministers resign. We saw another prime minister, a former prime minister today, being assassinated. There's a lot of uncertainty right now in the world, and I think President Biden is offering hope to people just to continue to move forward and steady and let people know that we are working on behalf of the American people. I think that there's lots of different reasons for this happening, but we're living in a very unique time. And what I would say to people when I was the mayor of Boston, I would end my press conferences talking, if you need help, reach out and make a call. The president addressed some of that. So we have mental health challenges in this country. We have either individuals struggling or their families are struggling. I think as a country, we need to come together. We need to come together. I think Congress needs to work together. I think we need to put our partisan politics aside. I think we need to come together. The president talked about passing legislation with both sides of the aisle. We need, as we head into an election season, I think people need to realize you're adults, you're campaigning out there, and remember, people paying attention, and Americans have gone through a lot of stress in the last 2 years.
You mentioned the CHIPS Act a couple of moments ago. That may be getting somewhere in Congress. There are also some murmurs that President Biden's Build Back Better legislation, or a scaled-back version of that may actually pass at some point this year. Do you think we will see some such legislation pass by the time of the midterms in November?
Yeah, I'm not on the CHIPS Act. I think it's paramount that Congress passes that. I think that because it is about investments in our country by companies and building buildings and creating opportunities. I think in the Build Back Better legislation, obviously the president, there was a lot in that bill that would impact American people. I think that, the president's working on some legislation about prescription drugs. I think that we should think about, the president has, in his first term, he still has 2 years to go. We don't have to pass everything the first year. And I think that it's going to be really important for us as a country when you think about the workforce and people in America, in the provisions that we had in that bill, whether it was child care, whether it was family leave, whether it was adult care, all of those are what people are struggling with every single day in their home. And I don't think it'll be called Build Back Better, and it might not be one piece of legislation, but I think there's lots of pieces of what the president plan that was laid out that is really important for American people.
Mr. Secretary, Starbucks has been showing the propensity to close stores that have moved to unionize. What do you think about actions like that, and have you talked to CEO Howard Schultz?
So, I don't know if, let me just rephrase the question because I'm not hearing it too well from you. About stores that are closing and shifting to online, is that what you said?
Well, Starbucks, the coffee retailer, they have shown the propensity to close stores that have moved to unionize. What do you think about a Starbucks doing that?
Oh, okay, sorry.
And then have you talked to their CEO?
I think that companies that are closing stores because of potential organizing or union organizing, I think that's in some ways you're doing a disservice to your constituent who goes in, and your customer, I should say, who goes in and uses your stores. And I think that what I would recommend is if a store organizes or a company organizes, I would recommend that the management of that company have a conversation with the union to see if there's middle ground there. Because I think that in a lot of cases, whether it's Starbucks or other stores, in some cases, there's not a lot of difference between what the union wants and what the companies are offering. And I think having those dialogues, and if your employees made a decision to organize, then I would ask the companies to recognize that opportunity and respect your employees who've done that. And I think that and certainly I've offered myself plenty of times to companies. I would love to have conversations if they want to ask me questions about what a union is, how it works. I've been on both sides of the line. I've been a union leader, and I've been the mayor of Boston. I negotiate against unions, so I've had a chance to see both sides of how it works, and I think having dialogue is important.
Well said. All right, we'll leave it there. U.S. Labor Secretary Marty Walsh, always good to see you. Have a great weekend, and good to see you as well. Yahoo Finance's Rick Newman.